Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today, we're plunging into questions that have, well, puzzled humanity for millennia. Questions so fundamental they feel like they're waiting for us at the very entrance of self-understanding. Who are you? Where do you come from? Where are you going?
It's true. And these aren't just abstract philosophical musings. They really echo that timeless ancient Greek maxim, the one carved on the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, know thyself.
Right.
And Socrates, often hailed as the wisest man in Athens, he interpreted that not as having all the answers, but actually as recognizing his own ignorance, that humility, that self-awareness of what you don't know. That was his true wisdom.
That's fascinating. So for thousands of years, philosophers have grappled with who am I without ever finding one single universally accepted answer. But here's where it gets really interesting for our deep dive today. Cognitive science and artificial intelligence are bringing fresh, really impactful perspectives to this age-old quest. We're not just philosophizing anymore, we're actually exploring the very mechanics of the brain.
Exactly. Yeah. And our core source for this deep dive is a phenomenal example of this modern approach. Douglas Hofstadter's profound book, I Am a Strange Loop.
Hofstadter. Okay.
Hofstadter, often known as Hoshida in some academic circles, is a renowned cross-disciplinary scholar. He's a professor of cognitive science and computer science at Indiana University and a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. He really bridges philosophy, math, and AI in a unique way.
And he's known for some truly unique and celebrated works. His previous book, Gödel, Escher, Bach, was, well, it was a sensation, wasn't it? Won both a Pulitzer Prize and a National Book Award.
That's right, a landmark book.
But A Strange Loop is particularly poignant. It has this really deep personal motivation behind it. Hofstadter's wife, Carol, tragically passed away from a brain tumor back in 1993.
Yeah, terrible loss.
And this immense personal loss spurred him to explore whether a deceased loved one could truly be integrated into one's present self. It's a book born from grief, which, incredibly, then won the Los Angeles Times Book Prize for Science Writing in 2007.
It's deeply moving. So, our mission today is to explore Hofstadter's central concept, the strange loop theory of self. We want to understand basically three key things. First, what exactly is the self from this perspective? Second, why does Hofstadter define the self as a strange loop? What does that mean?
Okay.
And finally, how does this concept explain the relationship between self and others? And specifically, whether a loved one's self can genuinely become a part of our own mind.
All right, let's dig into this. Starting with what feels like the most obvious question. What's the self? In everyday life, the existence of self feels so undeniable, doesn't it? Like when you say, I'm going to get the package, or I didn't sleep well last night. It's just inherently you. It feels so utterly obvious.
That's our deeply ingrained intuition, absolutely. But here's where science challenges that feeling a bit.
Right.
If we examine the brain scientifically, from the tiniest molecular building blocks like amino acids and DNA, all the way up to the vast, intricate networks of neurons, their connections or synapses, and the distinct regions like the visual cortex or the left brain.
Yeah.
What you don't find, strangely enough, is a distinct, tangible self, just sitting there somewhere. It's not like finding an organ.
Okay, so if you're looking at all those parts, all the neurons and stuff, you might naturally think, well, maybe the self is like a complex puzzle, All these neural components, neurons, synapses, they're like the pieces, and when you put them all together, then you get the self. It's a whole that emerges from its parts. Is that what Hofstadter suggests?
That's a very common idea, and it's how many of us intuitively think about it.
Yeah.
Makes sense, right? But Hofstadter's view is much more radical. He argues the self isn't even a puzzle in that sense. It's not made of those parts.
Oh.
To illustrate this, he offers this really vivid thought experiment. Imagine your skull is a perfectly smooth, frictionless billiard table.
Okay.
On it, countless small, magnetic billiard balls are constantly colliding. Just chaos. Because they're magnetic, when they hit at low speed, many stick together, forming larger, almost motionless billiard balls.
Right, I'm picturing that. So what do these billiard balls represent in his analogy?
Okay, so the small, chaotic billiard balls represent the real physical neural activity in your brain. Individual neurons firing, synapses transmitting information. That's the fundamental nuts and bolts operation.
Got it. The low-level stuff.
Exactly. And those large, sticky billiard balls that form, those are the representational symbols in your mind. Think of them as your mental representations of the external world. Your parents, your cat, your car, or even abstract concepts like yourself.
Ah, okay. Our concepts.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But here's the crucial point. The large billiard balls are merely byproducts of the chaotic collisions of the small ones. They don't fundamentally change or influence the small ball activity itself. They just emerge.
Okay, whoa. So the complex thoughts and symbols we experience, our sense of self even, are just byproducts of the underlying neural chaos. That's a big idea. And it brings us to a really important term Hofstadter uses, epiphenomenon. What exactly does that mean?
All right, epiphenomenon. It's a key concept.
Mm.
Basically, an epiphenomenon is something that appears alongside a process, but doesn't actually cause or influence that process. It only exists dependent on it.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think of it this way. If you drag a heavy chair across a wooden floor, it might produce a loud squeaking sound.
Okay, yeah, annoying sound.
Right. The squeak is an epiphenomenon. It's a byproduct of the chair moving, friction, vibration. But the sound itself doesn't cause or influence the chair's movement. Once you stop dragging the chair, the sound stops instantly. It's completely dependent on the underlying action, but doesn't feed back into it.
Okay, I get that. So connecting that back to the billiard table, it's like our thoughts, our self, our concepts, they're the squeak.
Precisely. In Hofstadter's view, the large billiard balls are mental symbols, our conscious experience, are epiphenomena of the small billiard balls, which are the fundamental neural activities. Our everyday symbols, though absolutely vital for human language and thought, are scientifically seen as incidental byproducts. They emerge from the neural activity, but they don't then turn around and control it at that fundamental level.
Wow. Okay, that raises a huge and frankly a bit unsettling question then. If our self is just a byproduct, an epiphenomenon, then is it just an illusion? I mean, historically, many traditions, like the Buddhist concept of no self, have argued something similar, right? Emphasizing overcoming attachment to self. Is Hofstadter basically saying the same thing, that it's all just smoke and mirrors?
Well, Hofstadter offers a very nuanced perspective here, which I find incredibly compelling. On one hand, he agrees there's a reasonable sense in which the self is an illusion. You won't find a distinct, localized self if you were to open up a brain and probe its activity. Modern cognitive science won't pinpoint it like an organ. However, and this is critical, he strongly emphasizes that the self is not a deception or a trick that somehow fools us. Not at all. On the contrary, it's the very concept that integrates our thoughts and actions. It's what enables humans to think and express in uniquely advanced ways with complex, flexible, and infinitely combinable concepts that animals simply don't possess.
So it's necessary for our kind of thinking.
Absolutely essential. So in that regard, it's not some trick we play on ourselves, but our most authentic and necessary way of existing as complex thinking humans.
So let me try to sum this up for the first part. The self, according to Hofstadter, is a symbol, an epiphenomenon. It's not a whole made of parts like a puzzle, but a kind of high-level byproduct of the real causal processes buzzing away in the brain.
You got it.
While it has immense importance for our daily lives and our unique way of thinking, it doesn't have a distinct physical location or causal role in the brain's actual micro-operations. It exists somewhere between illusion and reality, a strange loop that we create, but paradoxically also rely on for our very existence.
Yeah.
It really challenges everything we intuitively feel about ourselves.
That's a perfect articulation. It's truly mind-bending. Now, if the self is this elusive byproduct, this epiphenomenon, how does Hofstadter connect that to his unique idea of a strange loop? This is where things get even more interesting.
Okay, yeah. So why is this epiphenomenon, this byproduct, called a strange loop? Let's start with something simple, like a baby recognizing itself in a mirror. You know, modern developmental psychology says this mirror stage is crucial for self-recognition.
Exactly.
It's a key distinction between us and animals without that kind of self-awareness, like my cat who just sees another cat in the mirror and gets confused.
Right. That mirror scenario provides the core insight into the loop aspect. The formation of the self symbol requires information feedback. For me to recognize myself, information about me must be fed back to me.
Okay, feedback, a loop.
Hofstadter takes this further with another thought experiment. Could a machine achieve self-concept with a similar feedback loop? Imagine a camera filming a screen which is displaying the camera's own output.
Oh yeah, the infinite tunnel effect.
Precisely, a continuous video feedback loop. This perfectly illustrates the basic loop idea, information going out and coming back in.
Okay, I can visualize that loop, but surely this simple video loop isn't the same as ourself, is it? That seems, well, almost too mechanical for consciousness.
You're right, it's both similar and profoundly different. The similarity is that the self does arise from a feedback loop, hence, it's a loop. Information cycles back. But the video loop is neutral, right? The camera has no conscious processing, no subjective interpretation, no distortion based on memory or feeling.
Right, just reflect.
Exactly. Human perception, however, is deeply subjective. We process information, we recall memories, we make judgments, we infer connections, we feel emotions about what we perceive. All these subjective processes make the human self a different kind of loop, a strange one.
Okay, so the loop is the feedback. Where does the strange come in then? What makes it strange?
The strangeness comes from self-reference. When you say, I'm going downstairs to get a package, the I refers to you, the speaker. This ability to refer to oneself is a direct result of having established a self-concept, this loop. You can actually observe this developing in young children who haven't quite established this fully yet. They might say, baby is hungry, or Johnny wants juice instead of I am hungry, using their name almost like an external label before the internal I fully clicks.
That makes sense. I've heard kids do that. But wait a minute. Doesn't self-reference often lead to logical dead ends or paradoxes? I seem to remember this from philosophy or math class. And usually, paradoxes mean something is broken or flawed in the logic.
That's a great point, and it's precisely what Hofstadter addresses. You're absolutely right. Self-reference can lead to what are called logic paradoxes or logical absurdities.
Yeah.
A classic example is Russell's Barber paradox.
Oh, the barber paradox. Remind me how that goes again.
Okay, so imagine a village with a barber who shaves only those men in the village who do not shave themselves. The question is, does the barber shave himself?
Okay, let me think. If he shaves himself, then he belongs to the group of men who do shave themselves. But his rule says he only shows those who don't shave themselves. So he can't shave himself.
Right.
But if he doesn't shave himself, then he belongs to the group of men who do not shave themselves. And his rule says he must shave those men, so he must shave himself. Ugh, my head's spinning just thinking about it. It's a complete logical deadlock, a true paradox.
Exactly. You've hit the nail on the head. The paradox arises entirely from the self-referential nature of the rule. Now, many logicians, like Bertrand Russell himself, saw this kind of self-reference as bad or pathological and tried to create logical systems that would prohibit it, viewing it as a fundamental flaw.
Yeah, it seems like you'd want to avoid that kind of contradiction.
But Hofstadter's counterintuition here is absolutely key. He argues that self-reference is not bad. In fact, it's absolutely essential for the self. To have a self-concept, this symbolic I that allows for self-reference, we must accept the strange tears and absurdities, the inherent paradoxical nature that comes with it. This acceptance of inherent paradox is the strange part of the strange loop.
Wow, okay. So he's saying our very self contains a paradox, just like the barber paradox. What kind of paradox are we talking about within ourselves then?
Hofstadter says the self contains a paradox mirroring these logical ones. The paradox of omnipotence and powerlessness.
Omnipotence and powerlessness, how so?
Well, on one hand, there's our sense of omnipotence, our capacity for thought, enabled by the richness and incredible flexibility of language and symbols, allows us to form infinitely varied concepts and express incredibly complex ideas. We can imagine anything, simulate futures, reflect on the past. It feels like we are all powerful in our ability to represent and manipulate the world symbolically in our minds.
Right, our minds can conjure anything. We can build cities in our thoughts, imagine entire universes, understand abstract math.
Exactly. But then there's the flip side, the powerlessness. We are fundamentally unable to directly perceive or access the underlying neural activity, the small billiard balls colliding that gives rise to these very thoughts. Like with the billiard table analogy, we know intellectually that only the small balls are really colliding, but our everyday conscious experience is entirely of the large billiard balls, a world of abstract concepts like hope, belief, joy, fear, love, seemingly governed by non-material laws of meaning and intention. We are powerless to directly touch, perceive, or control that true micro-level neural reality that makes it all happen.
So we're masters of the symbolic world that emerges, but completely cut off from the physical engine running it.
Precisely. It's a deep irony, isn't it? The very thing that grants us such profound mental power also isolates us from its own physical origins. That's the paradox.
So to summarize part 2,
Yeah.
the self is a strange loop because it's a circle, a feedback loop, like mirror recognition, or a video loop, which allows for self-recognition and the creation of the I symbol. And it's strange due to its paradoxical nature, much like those logical paradoxes. The simultaneous feeling of omnipotence in our symbolic thought and the reality of powerlessness to perceive or influence its underlying neural reality. That's truly a profound and, yeah, really counterintuitive combination.
It truly is. And understanding this sets the stage perfectly for our third and final question.
Yeah.
What is the relationship between self and others in this strange loop view?
Hmm.
This is where Hofstadter's deeply personal motivation for writing I Am a Strange Loop comes right back into full focus.
Yes, his profound grief after his wife Carol's death, his yearning to bring her back, or at least somehow integrate her essence into his mind, really drove this whole inquiry, didn't it? The idea that someone's self, once gone, could still exist within you feels like such a fundamental human desire, especially when you're grieving.
Absolutely. And this raises an important question that challenges our common intuition. Most people assume, quite naturally, that a person's self dies entirely with their body. That's it, gone.
Right.
But Hofstadter's theory posits something different. If the self is merely a symbol, an epiphenomenon, a strange loop based on underlying neural activity, but then immersed in the symbolic world, then perhaps it doesn't have to disappear completely when the physical body ceases to function. Maybe the pattern can persist elsewhere.
Okay, so how does that work? How can another person's self, their pattern, be integrated into mine? It sounds almost like, well, like science fiction or maybe something spiritual.
Hofstadter frames it through the concept of representational universality. Remember the omnipotence part of the paradox.
Yeah.
Humans have this incredible ability to represent the world symbolically. We can understand things without being physically present or directly experiencing them.
Okay.
For example, imagine you're watching your dog playing on a security camera feed from miles away. You're just seeing pixels on a screen, right? But your mind instantly recognizes your playful dog. You understand the context. Security camera, miles away, my backyard. A dog, however, looking at the same screen, wouldn't understand concepts like 24-hour camera or 2,000 miles away because it lacks those complex conceptual symbols.
Right. It might just see moving shapes or another dog. It doesn't have the symbolic framework.
Exactly. This highlights how humans use symbols to represent and understand the world in uniquely powerful ways that other animals cannot. We create internal models.
That's a great example to clarify our unique ability with symbols. So how does this representational universality connect back to Hofstadter's experience with Carol and this idea of someone living on in our minds?
Well, it's quite profound when you think about it. Hofstadter describes that when he watched videos of his deceased wife, or even just thought deeply about her, the symbolic patterns triggered in his brain were, in essence, the same patterns that would have been triggered if she were physically present and interacting with him.
Wow.
What's fascinating here is that when we think of a loved one, especially someone we know incredibly well, we activate their symbols, their characteristic patterns within our own minds. It's like allowing an outsider their unique way of thinking, speaking, reacting to temporarily invade or resonate within our mental space. We simulate them.
So we're essentially running their program on our own hardware.
In a manner of speaking, yes. We generate their specific patterns of speech, their ideas, their unique way of framing things, their memories as we remember them, their style, their inclinations, their very strange loop can become embedded in how we perceive and interact with the world. We can ask ourselves, what would Carol have said about this? And get a pretty good simulation of her response.
So it's not about them physically returning, obviously, but about their unique symbolic patterns, their loop living on and being reactivated in our own minds. That sounds like a powerful way to frame connection and memory.
Exactly. Hofstadter argues that other people's selves can be reproduced to a degree within our own minds, especially those we deeply understand and resonate with. Our brain, with its amazing representational capacity, accommodates these other selves. This is why we feel loved ones can truly reappear in our minds, almost as if they're still physically with us, influencing our thoughts, our decisions, even our sense of humor or our values long after they're gone.
This truly brings everything full circle. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it means the self isn't just tethered to a physical body. It's a unique way of seeing the world, a specific pattern of symbolic representation, a strange loop.
Right.
And because the self is viewed this way as an epiphenomenon, a strange loop, it allows for other selves, their patterns, to become a part of our own. It explains that deep, intrinsic bond we feel with others, why they feel like part of us.
That's the crux of it. The self and others are inherently intertwined. Even minimal interactions with strangers create tiny connections, tiny echoes. But the most significant connections, the deepest resonances, come from those vital to our lives, our parents, children, partners, closest friends. They aren't just others external to us. They enter me. They shape our loop. Without them, we literally wouldn't be who we are.
So our ability to internalize these deeply resonant individuals means we can truly live with our loved ones forever.
by recreating their strange loop within our own, just as Hofstadter felt Carol never truly left him. Her pattern continued to resonate within his own loop.
What an incredible journey we've been on today. Just stunning ideas. I love how Hofstadter blends the highly technical, the logical paradoxes with the deeply personal and emotional. Let's quickly recap the key takeaways from his strange loop theory of self.
Okay, first, the self is a symbol, an epiphenomenon. It's a high-level byproduct of brain activity, not a physical thing you can point to in the brain's operations. Yet it's absolutely crucial for our daily life and consciousness. It's like that squeak of the chair, remember? Dependent, but not directly causal at the micro level. It's what allows us to navigate our world meaningfully.
Right. Second, the self is a strange loop. It's a feedback mechanism, a loop, like mirror recognition, that creates the sense of I. But it's strange because it combines a paradoxical omnipotence, our vast symbolic thought, with a powerlessness, our inability to access the underlying neural reality that generates it. It's like those tricky logical paradoxes. It's both incredibly powerful and curiously limited.
Well put. And finally, point three. Because the self is this peculiar kind of symbolic pattern, this strange loop, it has the capacity to incorporate and reproduce the selves, the unique patterns of others within our own minds, especially those we love and who deeply resonate with us. It's how the people who shape us become a fundamental, inseparable part of who we are.
The self is, yeah, an eternal philosophical question, absolutely. But as we've seen today, it's also a red-hot topic in modern cognitive science, with new scientific tools and frameworks like Hofstadter's offering clearer, maybe more profound insights than ever before. So what does this all mean for us, the listeners, who are experiencing our own strange loop right now as we listen? What's the final thought?
Well, I think Hofstadter's profound message ultimately is that science isn't meant to debunk or diminish our common sense notion of self or our deep feelings of connection. Instead, by understanding the self as a strange loop, science actually helps us grasp why the self is so profoundly dependent on others and why our loved ones are so fundamentally important to who we are. It validates our deepest human connections, showing that our capacity to internalize others, to carry their patterns within us, is not just a feeling, not just sentimentality, but a fundamental aspect of how our own strange loop operates and maintains itself. It's really a beautiful intersection of complex science and deeply felt human experience, reminding us that even within our individual minds, because of these loops connecting us, we are never truly alone.